Hi there, it's October the 1st and we're continuing our voyage through Paul's letter to the Philippians, and we're in chapter 2 reading from verses 19 through to chapter 3 and verse 3. Paul, in the beginning of this reading, reveals his heart about two very close brothers to him. The first one is Timotheus. Now remember, Paul and Timothy are writing this letter together. Paul has already named Timothy as one of the co-writers of this letter. And here Paul is actually commending Timothy to the Philippians. He wants to send Timothy to them. He says, I don't have anyone of the same spirit as him. And it's amazing that here is Paul in prison who can trust Timothy. He can trust his spirit enough to send him to represent who Paul is. It's amazing when God builds that kind of relationship between people, that they know that they can entrust themselves to the other to correctly carry their message. So Paul wants to send them Timothy, but he also then mentions another brother. We call him Epaphroditus. In Greek he's Epaphroditus, and his name actually comes from the word that is the same name as the Greek goddess Aphrodite, and it actually means beautiful or charming. So Epaphroditus, his name means beautiful or charming. But he's actually most likely from Philippi. He's a Macedonian, and it seems he's the one who was given the job of carrying the gifts from Macedonia, from Philippi, to Paul in prison. And so he's been serving Paul in prison. And Paul has a great commendation for him. He calls him his co-worker, his co-soldier. And he calls him also apostolos, but the apostolos, the messenger, the envoy of the Macedonian people. And now he's also become a servant of Paul for their sake. So in that Macedonians can't come en masse, the whole church can't come and serve Paul, Epaphroditus or Epaphroditus is making up the lack of their service by himself being present with Paul. And he's extremely grateful for Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus, who may also be called Epaphras in other places, is also probably the one who's going to carry some of Paul's letters back. And so he's really doing Paul a great service. And then at the beginning of chapter 3, Paul just has a couple of things to say. He says, first of all, he encourages his brothers and sisters in Christ to constantly rejoice. He uses the Greek word cherete. And cherete is a very common Greek word. Even today in modern Greece, people will say to each other, cherete. It means rejoice. It means be glad. And Paul is encouraging them always to rejoice, always to encourage one another. And he wants them to be blessed and to be encouraged and to constantly rejoice. But he then also says something to balance this. He says, watch out for those who are trying to pull you into getting circumcised to obey the law. He actually has a very rough word for them. He calls them dogs, which is in Hebrew understanding a very low creature. He says they're dogs who are just trying to get hold of you to make you their disciples. But actually he says they call themselves of the circumcision. They worry about the circumcision. But Paul says we are the true circumcision. Circumcision not done in the flesh. We're not putting our confidence in what's done in human flesh, but it's what's done in our hearts. We are the circumcision of the Spirit. We are the circumcision, and our boast is not in what we've done to our bodies, but our boast is only in who Jesus Christ is and what he's done. Paul is again very keen, and he's going to go on to talk about his Hebrew, his Jewish heritage. But Paul is intent on saying that it's not about keeping religious traditions. We cannot earn our way into the kingdom of God. And but we are circumcised. Our hearts have been changed. We are circumcised in the Spirit. So as we read these words of Paul, trusting his friends, commending his friends, telling his readers to rejoice at all times and telling them to beware of religious traditions which have no bearing on the gospel, let us also be sure that we continually make our boast, that we make our pride in Jesus, not in ourselves or anything we've done today. Have a very good October the 1st.